Welcome to today's faculty panel sponsored by the Center for Teaching and Learning Excellence at St. Leo University. I'm Candace Roberts, the Director of the Center for Teaching and Learning Excellence. We'll be recording this webinar, so if you'd like to view it later or recommend it to a colleague, you'll find it on our webinar page, on our St. Leo CTLE website, or on our YouTube channel. And we'll drop the links for those in the chat at the end of today's session. We'll also be initiating a few poll questions throughout the session, so feel free to anonymously respond to the questions or to drop any additional thoughts or insights into the chat. Our topic today is ChatGPT and artificial intelligence in higher education. Our speakers today, and if you'll just kind of raise your hand when I introduce you, would be great. Our speakers today are Dr. Man Van Nguyen, Chair and Associate Professor of Computer Science, Dr. Stephen Oki, Associate Professor of Religion, Dr. Janice Prince, Chair and Associate Professor of Sociology, Dr. Zachary Smith, Assistant Professor of Economics and Finance, Professor Frank Orlando, Instructor of Political Science, and Mr. Darius Lewis, Director of Information Security. Each speaker will take 1 to 2 minutes to share their thoughts about GPT, or ChatGPT, and then I'll follow up with a few questions for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll allow 20 to 30 minutes for our audience to ask questions and engage in the conversation. We'll open today with Dr. Van Nguyen, who will give us a brief overview of ChatGPT. So Van, take it away.
Thank you, Candice. Just 1 or 2 minutes. It's first developed by Google and University of Toronto in 2017, which is very recently. So they created what they created was a transformer. You take something, it transform to something else. So that's basically the idea. So later, Elon Musk and Sam Altman created, and some other people created OpenAI Inc. The idea was to create an AI that can be controlled so that it does not to go beyond the limit. But Elon Musk quit when it became a for-profit company. And so to stop it from interfering with the AI that Elon Musk developed at his company, Tesla. So he doesn't want to have a conflict between the two companies, so he quit. And now it became a for-profit company. So OpenAI, they just built more on the transformer, and they created what we have now is the generative pre-training transformer. And that's what we call it GPT. And this is a very revolutionized AI model that use a lot of information to create an output. So, for example, the original is used as GPT-1 used 17 billion parameters. GPT-3 used 175 billion parameters to compute the output. So now we are on GPT-3, but soon we're going to move on to GPT 3.5 and GPT-4. So what it does is it uses self-attention module instead of what we usually heard of neural network, recurrent neural network. The recurrent neural network, it's used to process time series data, like what we have, like the stock chart or any information that require time completion. So, but this one, the self-attention module, is used, is capture long-term dependencies. If you have a sentence or input data, it's going to look at individual tokens and going to relate them to to one another. So it's better for natural language processing. And ChatGPT is just a chat box that's powered by GPT technology. So and it can do a lot of things. It can generate text on any topic, produce essays, answer questions, summarize text, and it can write computer code and solve some simple math problems. And the main limitation of ChatGPT is that it does not have true understanding on subject. So it can take an input and produce an output, but it does not understand what it's saying. So this is the quote directly. I asked ChatGPT if it understands the language. It say it cannot. As a AI language model, I do not have true understanding of the sense, in the sense that human understand language and the world. So yeah, that's ChatGPT. And I run it very quickly, so we have time limit. So if you have any questions, just let me know. So
Great, thank you, Van. That was a really great technical introduction to an overview to ChatGPT and a great way to get us started. We'll turn to the other faculty now to share a minute or two of their insights or experience with ChatGPT. And let's start off with Dr. Stephen Oki.
Hi, everybody. As a way of thinking about ChatGPT, the way that I think about it is something that I think pretty much all instructors are familiar with, which is BS. And what ChatGPT can generate is pretty good BS with very little effort. And so it will create text that is coherent, that can be grammatically flawless, it can have no spelling errors, and it can sort of seem like, if you read over it quickly, it can seem persuasive or good enough or something like that. But Van was indicating this, ChatGPT does not understand what it is saying. It has no consciousness, has no awareness. It's making probabilistic judgments based on its training data. And what that means for us as teachers, insofar as students might be using it, is I think many of us have probably received assignments from students in the past that where the student would even admit they were BSing. They were sort of just making it up and doing their best and putting things together. And they didn't really know if it was right. They didn't really understand it, but it sort of fit the rubric. And ChatGPT can do that with no effort on the part of the student to try to think through things or have read anything or have done any grammar or spelling or anything else. And so I guess, and to the extent that we are sometimes good at BS detection, we're kind of doing the same kind of thing with potentially AI generated material. But it does take away an opportunity for a student to have to actively engage with texts, with critical thinking, with putting in their own understanding to something as they work with it. So I'll stop for there.
Great, thank you, Stephen. How about Janice, Dr. Prince? Would you give us your insights on it?
Yes, I think this is yet another opportunity for us in the academy to think about how we do what we do. I think there have been lots of innovations along the way where, somebody cries, it's the end of the world, teaching is over, right now with ChatGPT, our essay is over. I think for me, it really is an opportunity for us to ask ourselves, are we going to keep on teaching the way we have always taught? Are we going to keep teaching the ways we were taught and paying particular attention to the kinds of assessing we do? I think it's an opportunity for us to really ask very, very basic questions like, why am I assigning this essay? What is it that I want my students to know or learn by doing this? And I think if we can sort of think through that and be open, then I think we can withstand the challenges of ChatGPT. I just had an adjunct tell me that she found student work that was done by ChatGPT. And so we had a discussion about how she knew that, right? And about, part of this is that there are also applications now that are detecting these kinds of materials. So we can do that. We have Turnitin, right? There's always going to be the push and pull, right? The good guy, the white hats and the black hats, as they say. But I think more fundamentally, again, I come back to thinking about the way whether we want to simply police this technology or use it to rethink our profession. That's my major thought about this, especially as it's related to assessment.
Thank you, Dr. Prince. I appreciate those insights. Okay, and now Dr. Zachary Smith.
Hello. I guess I think of about ChatGPT as more of an opportunity than a threat. A while ago, we were looking at in finance. We were looking at cryptocurrencies and questioning their value in the whole financial space. And what came out of that was blockchain technology, and it has a lot of useful implications for executing contracts and other things. And a lot of exchanges have moved their exchange related procedures to the blockchain network. So I think that figuring out how we should deploy ChatGPT in, I guess, an ethical way, I think will be really important in the future. I just have a quote from Microsoft's CEO. Says people with office jobs involved in so-called knowledge work should embrace new tools rather than assuming they will steal their jobs, citing the example of computer software developers who currently use tools to help them generate some of the code that they write. And I was talking earlier to this panel, and I said that in my class, I showed my students, because coding isn't a primary thing for or it isn't something I really need them to learn, but I need them to code in R for my senior seminar. We asked the chatbot how to code a synthetic control method, and it spit out lines of code for the synthetic control method. So I think it's a useful tool. We figure out how to use it. It also can make suggestions for Thanksgiving dinner if you want to do that, or other people have used it for writing jokes. So I think it's just having knowledge of what the tools can do for us and how we could deploy those tools to make our students more successful when they exit St. Leo University or leave St. Leo University, because they're going to have access to the tools, I think is important. So instead of, dismissing it, I would choose to embrace it and figure out how to work it into our curriculum. That's it, Candace.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Smith. All right. And Professor Frank Orlando, how about you?
Yeah, I think I would echo a lot of the sentiments already brought up. I first started hearing about this back in November, and I was super interested in it and immediately tried to start incorporating things into class that used it. I was wondering going into the spring semester if I should change some of my assignments to ChatGPT proof or AI. And we're saying ChatGPT, but obviously that's just one of the AIs that are available for people. So I would not maybe use exclusive language like ChatGPT on Sylvi when you're telling people not to use things. So I've tried to make sure that students are examined in different ways, making sure that there's some sort of non-computer element, so that at some point they may have to work without. Changing assignments so that it's not just a prompt and a paper, but maybe more of a project that includes different elements that really ChatGPT probably can't produce, such as videos or presentations. And also, I left some of the assignments in that I thought were most vulnerable for this semester, because I wanted to see maybe differences in grade or differences in adoption if people are going to use this, and what kind of work it would produce. And as I said, when we met last week as just a panel, along with Steve's point, I wasn't as impressed with the work that it did than that I thought I was going to be. I put my exams into it, and I used my rubric to grade the output. And this was really doing C work. And so my thought is, for students that just want to pass your class, that are short on time, that need to get things done, for them, this might be an option. And if you aren't careful with how you design your class and your assessments, your class will be vulnerable. But for students that want to, succeed and excel, then at least at this point, it's not as big of a threat as I was originally concerned with. Although, the more expert students get with using AI programs, and the more expert the AI programs get, obviously, it could be, more of an issue. But that's been my experience. But I'm just super interested in all these questions that everyone has brought up so far.
Thank you, Frank. Appreciate that. Now, Mr. Darius Lewis, I'll bring a different perspective, being our Director of Information Security. So, Darius?
Yeah, hello everybody. So this is wonderful. I'm glad that we're having this open discussion about ChatGPT. I've had the luxury of playing around with it probably the past 6 months, feeding it data, looking at the outputs, seeing what it can do, seeing what its limitations are. I think in the education space, so far I've been marking down here how many people have kind of said no to it. A few people said yes to it, a few people have said maybe to it. Incorporating it into the St. Leo environment or in the higher ed environment. I was asked 2 months ago for us to actually block this system. And I said no to blocking it because of its value. We use it in the security space to help write code, just like Dr. Smith was talking about. And if we were to block that, then that doesn't give you guys the ability to use a teaching method that even in the chat, high schoolers are using this. We know high schoolers are using this. So if we prevent and don't allow the students to really take full advantage of this, but understand and let them know that, hey, this is an AI system. This can't replace the human thought process. You still need human intervention to formulate those ideas, to produce new information. ChatGPT won't do that. It's just taking the data that we know today and it's just rewriting it in a fun, playful way. So we still are going to have to at least allow the students, I think, to use it in the classroom space, but we oversee how they use it. And we let them know, look at the output that you're getting, change your verbiage and see what that looks like. For us, from the security perspective, it allows us to write firewall rules, allows us to do vulnerability testing, allows us to create and generate reports, allows us to create custom code, things that we don't have to spend time on, but allows us to protect the university on a high level at a rapid pace. So I'm going to go with a yes as far as GBT goes here at the university level, at least for St. Leo. I think it is beneficial to higher ed, but I think it just needs to have that tender loving care and being taught to the students on how to use it properly. That's my feedback.
Great, Darius. Thanks. I hope later in our conversation, you'll talk a little bit about some of the risks of us feeding information into ChatGPT and what we have to be aware of, not only for ourselves, but for the university as well. And what you just shared actually leads me to a question I was planning to ask later on, but I think now is a good time for it. I have a quote from Professor Stephen Atlas. He's an associate professor of marketing at the University of Rhode Island. He says this, and I'd like for a few people to comment on it. He says, quote, ChatGPT also has the potential to prepare students for an AI-enabled workforce. As technology continues to advance, the ability to work with and understand AI systems will be increasingly important in many industries. By incorporating ChatGPT into higher ed curriculum, students can develop the skills necessary to effectively use AI in their future careers. This can help students develop a competitive edge in the job market and be better prepared to work in fields that will be impacted by the integration of AI technology, end quote. I know, Zach, you commented a little bit on that, and Darius, you certainly have. Are there any other comments that you would want to add to given this quote, or are there others who would want to respond to that quote?
I'll chime in if you guys don't mind. I completely agree with that quote. Today, they're using AI in our help desk tools today. So if you guys are looking for support on the help desk level, you need a question asked by one of the technicians. Being that we have been so tight with our teams in the past couple of months, you might not be able to get that opportunity to speak directly with somebody. But with that AI integration, if we're dropping in data at a help desk level, you can ask your question and get data output spit back out to you to answer the question that you perhaps don't have to put a ticket in and wait a couple of days for us to get back to you. But I can see that as a benefit.
Yeah, I think that the gains in efficiency from being able to use AI, it's massive. And students and the people that we produce that will be able to use those things really in whatever field. I mean, you can think about political science majors that are going to go on to law school. Well, being able to use AI to rifle through more case law, right, on a topic, or to help do research on something, that's going to be pretty helpful. And so that will be a skill, I think, that students can take with them from here that will put them in a position to be successful. So I'm definitely agree to it to an extent.
From my perspective, I think students don't know what they don't know. Students are probably more hip than us. Well, I'll speak for myself. Students are probably more hip than me, right? And if they don't know that, for example, when I was in my undergrad, I had to send out all these cover letters and make them specific to every different position I was applying for. I asked ChatGPT to write a cover letter for me. I gave him a couple bits of information about me, spits out 3 paragraphs. That was well written, good enough. I would go in and edit it if I wanted to actually apply for the positions. And I think stuff like that, or for the DBA program, I asked them, what are the stages of completing a dissertation? It spit out the stages of completing a dissertation. And I asked it to give me a 12-week plan to finish my dissertation. It outlined a 12-week plan that I could kind of use to actually complete my dissertation. That's something that students could use without kind of crossing that line, crossing that line in terms of getting into the muddy ethical waters and things like that. I don't know how. Yeah. Anyways, that's my thoughts.
I saw the same thing for it was a portion of healthcare where people, if you wanted to work out, you could put in your calorie intake, how old you are, how many days of the week that you can work out, and it'll actually create a workout plan for you.
I think, it's like everything else. It's a tool. And so we have to think about and talk about how are we going to use it. Lots of great descriptions here of both in talk and in the chat about how this is already being used. And Zach, I think it was you or Stephen who brought up the ethical issue, right? We also will have to talk about when and how to use it and where does it cross the line. I mean, AI can spit out lots of things, as Frank said, right? Maybe C-level work. I've fed it a couple of questions and got about C-level work. I asked it to write me a book, and I got a fabulous proposal, what I would see as a proposal outline. And don't forget, we're talking about other professions, but I haven't seen or heard in our own profession, right? Are our CVs going to be filled with things that were produced by ChatGPT or other AI? And how are we going to view that? But again, talking to students about what is the difference? What are we as humans able to produce and do that is different from what AI can do, right? I think that has to be part of the conversation with students. Here's a tool. How do you use the tool? And what are you bringing to the table that makes you different from AI? Because if you're not, then, the other part of this conversation is, do we need to hire humans, or can we just, envision a future not that far away in which just use AI?
I think we should fully embrace it with limitation. So I'm going to share a screen real quick one more time. So this is what I received. Let me see. From GPT-0, can you see it? So they go to partner with K16 solution to bring GPT-0 to school, and can integrate it with D2L. This is what we're using. But right now, it's not available yet, but you can use GPT-0 for, whatever material you want to check to see if it's generated by an AI bot. So you can upload a batch of homework, right, or assignment for them to check. And that is, I think this is a good tool if you want to check. We can use ChatGPT for discussion, for brainstorm ideas, and any draft work. But for homework or any kind of graded work, we should use some tools to check for cheating or plagiarism. And this is, I mean, you have heard this news, right? So the deans of the school from this university got fired for using ChatGPT. So even in our profession, we still, have to be careful of what we are doing. Otherwise, we're going to get trapped into the same situation as a student. So that's what I just want to share.
Thanks, Van. That kind of prompts the next question, which is, what can you do to maintain academic integrity while using ChatGPT with your courses, or if you use it? Regardless of whether you use it or not, what can you do to maintain academic integrity? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, if I could, I wanted to comment a little bit to the question before as well. I think that institutions in general, our university in particular, need to probably think about what policies it wants to have around artificial intelligence, both on the part of students and also on the part of faculty and other departments. You can imagine a sort of worst case scenario where my student submits homework that they just used AI to generate, and then I just grade it using AI, and nothing has really occurred in a meaningful way. So I think that, as others have noted, I think it's important and good to try to find ways to incorporate and teach students about the technology and use it where it is useful. But I think part of it also is an issue that we have had for a long period of time, especially with easier access to the internet more broadly, is information literacy, digital literacy, and the particular ways that applies in different disciplines. And so the way that Zach and Frank and Janice might incorporate AI into their courses and into their research will differ in part based on disciplinary requirements. And I think many of us already run into challenges with students where the research and citation, style expectations, sociology are different from what they are in theology. And students don't always understand the differences there. And so then introducing a new, a new tool that is potentially very groundbreaking, I think potentially further complicates that. In terms of then going back to the ethical questions, there is something about what we want students who graduate from St. Leo to be able to do. We want them to be like intelligent, self-aware, critical thinkers who are able to make good use of available tools, but also to do their own work in a real sense and understand why that work is good work. And so, like as Darius was saying, if a student asks ChatGPT for a workout regimen and then gets one that is actually potentially harmful to their health, we need them to be able to have the skills and intelligence to recognize this is actually a bad plan. I should not follow this. Because at present, there's no guarantee that any AI is going to generate anything accurate. And I think students need to be able to recognize, and faculty need to be able to recognize and have the skills to critically evaluate what is generated by those materials in the same way they need to be able to critically evaluate anything else that they read.
Right. So critical is the word I would underline in what you're saying there, right, Stephen? So critical thinking comes back to that. And I think so far we've got the AI beat on that. We can hold on to that for now and train our students along those lines. One of the articles I read, I can't remember where now, but pointed to the fact that one of an essay written by whichever AI, I think it was ChatGPT, again, BSc-ish kind of a paper with a reference that looked fine, but actually was not a real reference, right? So it's this little game there that part of what I was saying in terms of our assessments, digging, are we going to be willing, if it's about policing, to check every reference in that way? We're expert in our field. We cannot be expected to know by just looking at it every single reference that a student might turn in. But again, I go back to where I started, thinking about what it is we want our students to know and learn. And a part of that is having conversations with them about what it is that we think is important, what we're trying to teach by doing these things, what discussions about pedagogy, a lot of the why that I think that we have to examine our whys and then have that discussion with students, because tricky. And I will say, I said this in the panel that some have referenced, that indeed for some of our students, that CBS paper is really just fine.
Has anyone given any thought to including a syllabus statement regarding the use of AI in your class so that parameters are clear to the students from the get-go?
I think if anybody answers that and says yes, they have, I would love to couple that with a policy that we can enforce at the top tier for the university, because you could easily put that in your syllabi and then have nobody to enforce that.
Well, a good point, Darius, although I suspect a syllabus statement in my course might look different from a syllabus statement in Stephen's course or Frank's course. I think every professor may have different expectations of their students, but I think the critical thing is making those expectations clear from the very first day of class, what you will accept and what you won't, and what your expectations are. So, in terms of assessments, is there a way to AI proof your assessments?
I think that's what Dr. Wynn had showed, the GPT-0. It looked like it was a analyzing system that proofed the information that was uploaded into the system on the fly.
Yeah, there is. I also posted one in the chat. It's called Copy Leaks, and I have a webinar video. They just did a webinar yesterday, and they use the same platform, the AI open platform, to detect cheating. Or what they do is it's one of those things where you can't necessarily 100% say that it is 100% across the board, or it gives you mixed analysis. So if somebody did use several statements that were generated by AI or plagiarized somewhere else, it'll give you like a report, like Turnitin or something that says what percentage of this came from an AI agent, what percentage, and they suggested then in that session that you have a conversation with students, because you can pull reporting for every student. That particular software requires a unique identifier for every student, so they can pull everything that the student has ever been submitted in there, and you can pull all the reports to see a pattern. Do you think plagiarism is a problem with the student? You can have a conversation with the student to see across courses, across submissions, what these scores look like. It's 75% AI, or it looks like this. Why is the student doing this? As opposed to just using it to say, okay, we're gonna ding you or give you an F or something like that. You can look at patterns for students you may be concerned about, and maybe communicate with them and see what's really going on there.
Yeah, and I was trying to find the example. I've tried this using some of the detectors, and I can't find the results right now, but I know in one case, I submitted students' work to one of the platforms, and it said 27%. It gave me a number, 27%, and it picked out that this portion was AI generated. But then I submitted it to another detector, and that one said 0%. So, here we go. In terms of sort of proofing or making our assessments better, which is sort of where I started out, I do think there's a lot, again, at the moment, right? These things move and change, but currently one of the areas that we see AI is lacking is in current events, right? And so making assessments, and this is easier in some fields, obviously, than other. Mine is a great one for it, sociology. Tying current events to things. And as I think, look, he just shared in the chat, I'm trying to see some of that, application, higher level blooms, applying stuff, that's, and again, isn't that what we are hoping for in any case, with or without AI? And that's why I say this is a call as teachers to really rethink our profession.
I see somebody raise their hand.
Lisa.
Lisa.
Thank you. That's really where I would like to piggyback to with what Janice is mentioning, that number one, our brains were not meant to memorize things and spit things back. Number two, that is not what the workplace is looking for, or adulting needs to have to be an adult, a successful adult. But we want to keep driving our students up the Bloom's taxonomy to help them to gain that critical thinking, so they can be evaluating all this overload of information they get, applying it, solving problems, using their creativity, assimilating it to other areas where they have solved a problem, that we can now use that same thing in our discipline or area. So even in undergrad at the 100 level, besides the first couple weeks where they have to get a content, awareness, we should be driving them by asking them to do assignments that take that beginning stuff from the AI spit out and doing all of the above, of applying it, evaluating it, critically thinking about it, solving problems with it, adding to it, throwing it out if it's nonsense. So I think that Janice is right when she's saying, let's relook at our assignments. Let's make sure that we're getting our students to move up that Bloom's taxonomy. And again, remembering that's what jobs want. They want those skills, not a set of memorization, because they can always teach content or train on content memorization.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone is saying on that. obviously, I mean, I'm someone that thinks you should teach people to use the tools that are available to them. But if everyone is going to have AI available to them, then the skills that AI is not good at are good skills to have, right? So you have to think about these things that's not going to do for you. And I think introducing those assessments is important. I think from an overall perspective in designing a course, I've always thought that you should be as like multiple as possible, where you have like of your assessments, different things, a paper here, or essays here, or presentations here, or workbook, like just multiple. And so I don't think if you have courses that are set up like this, they're already in some ways proofed from being cracked by AI. In terms of, just to go back to the syllabus thing, I mean, I briefly thought about this at the beginning of the semester, but I had, quite frankly, no idea yet how I would write this. Like I wanted to go through this semester to see like where things, you know, like what is going to come up to put into a future syllabus type statement. And I wasn't sure even at the beginning of the semester what I wanted to use and what I was not going to want to use. So, and still the ethical question of, you know, what is ethical to teach students to use this for and what's not? I don't think that most of our fields have an answer on that question yet. I mean, I agree with Zach in saying, you know, for social sciences that are using, you know, coding, that's not what we're teaching people, right? So that's not important for us. So yeah, okay. But what if you ask it to help you come up with a question? What if you ask it to like, what is the line between what's acceptable for you to use it for and what is your own thing? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if you guys know the answer to that yet.
I think I would add to that, because again, I would push that this is something students need to deal with in terms of academic integrity policies. But you know, what are going to be the conventions around citing what you got from AI or how you used it in, you know, papers or other kinds of assignments? Like, I mean, that needs to be a part of it too, potentially. I would also say I'm, I guess, not fully convinced that AI cannot reasonably simulate some of the higher Bloom's taxonomy verbs. And I'm definitely not convinced that it won't get better at them. Maybe it's not doing full A quality level work, but again, I mean, a lot of my students are happy with a B or a C. And so I don't want to I don't want to get comfortable with thinking like, well, it's really good at identifying, but it's bad at arguing. Like I think that that's not going to remain the case. And so I think that's something that I would say to continue to be attentive to. What I have done in terms of my own courses, I give oral finals in some classes, and it's time consuming, but I had planned to do that even before this came out, and I found it actually quite helpful in one of my courses. We did in a course that Frank and Tim Gisome and I co-teach, we did an in-class handwritten midterm, which I don't think I had ever done at St. Leo. And I don't know, we're grading them now, and it seems interesting. So, but we also, in class leading up to it, we had them, you know, write short, you know, midterm-like responses on Socrative, and we would project them and have people give their own feedback on what they were doing well and poorly. And I think that helps set them up to succeed. So, but some amount of, you know, face-to-face conversation with students when possible, I think is probably going to be helpful. So.
Do you guys think that with businesses starting to have this high demand of this kind of tool, do you think that certifications or this will become part of a need for universities to have as a curriculum? I know it's kind of a very open question.
I think it will, because I have to know how to use. I can see it in my area. I think it depends on what area you're talking about. So since like I'm in learning design, there's a lot of them that you're supposed to be, you can use to see it. So there's a lot of stuff that learning designers tools that we have to use that make us more, proficient, kind of the same way you were describing how you guys use them in the technical aspect. You have to know how to use them. And it makes it faster and easier. Just like in the art world, there's a big problem with graphic design now. People not wanting to hire graphic designers because they can use DALL-E 2 and stuff like that. And it's amazing. But now there are lawsuits about copyright on that. So if you're in a creative course, you might want to think about that too, talking to your students and maybe prohibiting them from using those things because it's literal copyright infringement as we know it, but it's a whole new world. And
Okay.
so, yeah, you would probably, if you're doing an art class or looking for images and things like that, you want to discuss that with your students, where they're coming from. So, yeah, I see a lot of the tools that are used for AI becoming industry standard, if that makes sense, for certain things like the help desk stuff. None of the help desk. I just had an issue yesterday. I had my car fixed, which is kind of funny. My car company, they come to your house. I use Car Body Lab. They come to your house. They're a Silicon Valley company, and they order your parts through AI. The AI bot orders your parts for you, and then a technician shows up at your house and fixes your car at your house. So he's fixing my bumper, putting my bumper on. It's like, wait, there's a part missing. Why is there a part missing? Because he had to talk to a human because the AI that ordered the part missed the part and didn't do it. So now they got to come back and send another part. So even when you're doing stuff like that, he had to call a guy that now works in the field. He used to be behind the desk like you guys. He's no longer behind the desk because the AI does all that, but he's the one with all the knowledge. So he had to call him to talk to him about a problem on site that the AI could not address. Nobody could figure it out. He just happened to still have his phone number. He's like, yeah, dude, I'm not even in the office anymore as of last week. I'm out in the field. So I'm like, okay, you still need to know people. You need to have a human being to help you at certain areas at all times.
That makes
Okay.
sense.
Yeah, it's an interesting example, isn't it? Here's a question. For those of you who are teaching online, are the implications any different for our online learning students and for our online courses than they are for our on ground?
I think, I don't know if they're different, but it feels like it's heightened or more urgent along those lines, because my experience, both as an instructor and as a chair for our online students, is that it has tended to be an area, in many cases, that is sort of this wild, wild west, where all kinds of things occur at a level that we don't tend to see on campus. And given that, for the most part, many of our online classes rely on traditional writing, right? And not some of the more innovative, creative things that we just heard, then, there we are, the weekly discussion board. I could do a whole book on that, but on those discussion boards, but here we go. I think the stakes are high for us to figure this out, especially for online, for those reasons. I don't know if everybody saw it, but I do want to just also mention, Lakita dropped in the chat that these bots reproduce the same kinds of isms that we have in reality. And that's something else that I think we have to consider. She mentioned that they can be triggering, but certainly that's something that students need to understand, that they might be reproducing. Or I could also see it being used where students can critique from a certain angle, right? Looking for whether it's homophobia or sexism or racism or something, but just to bring that up a little bit here, that's something else that we have to bear in mind.
If I could jump in here for just a minute, as far as online goes, it's more than just a theory. You can have an entire discussion thread that's nothing but AI postings. Just saying. One thing I'm doing at a very basic level is I get a writing sample from my students as quickly as possible when a course starts up. I provide an article relevant to the course they're taking. I have them read it, and then I say, pick out the key points and summarize the overall article and submit it to me by. Now I've got a sample of their writing. It happens in the classroom. And then when other opportunities come up with assignments where AI might be used or intervening, I can always compare it to what they submitted at the beginning of the term. It's a little more work, but it's worth it. And if you'll forgive me, this has been a very good time with you guys, but knock, knock. Anyone?
Who's
It's a
there?
knock, knock joke. Artificial intelligence.
Artificial intelligence, you.
Who do you want me to be?
It's true.
Sorry, I'll shut up now.
That's a good point.
I saw a I don't know where it was. It was either a video or article where they did artificial intelligence side by side written literature where they had a human write on a subject, and then they had AI write on the exact same subject, and they put both of these people right next to each other. Obviously, the AI is going to generate a lot quicker. And then they took both of those pieces and ran those writing summaries into a AI checker, and the AI came back 99% AI, and then the human person who's a writer came back at 50% AI, which is incredible because he wrote the paper in front of people, not using any computing device. So that piece in itself, that scares me, because those are his own ideas, and yet when it was put through the AI checker, it was seen as 50% written by a computer, but it wasn't. So I think for you guys teaching the students and the young students, that's going to be very challenging for you guys. I can see that now, because you might get those talented individuals that are good at writing, and you could say there's no way this so-and-so wrote this, but they actually wrote it. So
right. You're exactly right.
You know what I mean?
That's the problem. That's one of the problems. They were using AI 10 years ago. So you imagine how fast it's come from to to evaluate teacher performances in K-12. And they had a teacher who was an excellent teacher of the year, had just everything, just hands down. Somehow the AI recommended him being fired. And the principal, because he was ineffective, and the principal was smart enough to look at this and say, wait a minute, what is this? And they had just switched to using AI from this company, this third-party company. So they looked at it, and the principal said, nope, not doing it, and went and researched it and figured out that it was errors in there. Like they don't, a lot of people are embracing it and wanting to use it wholesale, like this is everything, but they don't understand the nuances and they don't understand the problems. And that's one of the issues and the biases that come in, things like that. You have to pay attention as a human being to what's going on. I think it's a tool, and it should never be something that we just rely on it as evidence. They were using it in court too. I mean, we've been using this for a long time and people don't realize it. There's like a really good documentary called Code Bias that talks about it, and in higher ed issues, all kinds of things. And there's a group called the Algorithmic Justice League that wrote the documentary, and they look for volunteers, and there's a lot of resources they have there. Even in assessments, like when we go to third-party companies to build assessments for us, there's a way you can check to see if they look at their algorithms. Like when they're looking at building test things for us and all that, you can look at their algorithms and see how they're doing it, and is it up to a certain standard that they're developing now to make sure that students aren't harmed by it, just all kinds of stuff, because people are jumping out there and it's not 100% here yet.
That's a great point, Monique. And we know it's learning. Every time we put something into it, it learns and it grows, and it will be evolving. But just as AI has its limitations and errors and biases, so do the AI checkers. They're not fail-safe. So we can't, especially right now, just police our way out of this or punish our way out of this. And it brings me to the last question that I have for the panelists, and anyone else can chime in as well with their insight. But Professor Jerry Davis at the University of Michigan's Ross School of Business made this statement: "I am one of the alarmists. Our entire enterprise in education is being challenged by this, and it will only get more challenging. It is time to rethink from the top to the bottom." What do you think he means by that?
I think it's exactly what was stated earlier, is that by putting ChatGPT in front of the face of the new learner right out the gate, that you've already set the tone. You let them know that, yeah, we played with this as well, just like you guys have played with this. So be cognizant of the information that it's giving you. I think that's kind of what he means to that, to say, hey, let's adopt it into our learning platform. I would encourage, again, I'm not teaching. I would encourage bringing up ChatGPT in front of the classroom, loading up a question in there and watching it spit out the wrong information, and then ask the students, what's your thoughts on this? Because ChatGPT will actually spit out wrong information. You set that bar right then and there, it's going to get that student to start thinking like, oh crap, I thought I could use this, but it could give me wrong information, where that critical thinking is going to need to be involved.
So I think, I so wish we had another hour. I think there's so much that you just said, Darius, as all of the other panelists, that we could really explore more. And I think this notion of, assessing who we are in the academy from the top down or the bottom up is really going to be critical and defining for us over the next 5 to 10 years. I think we already know that in the past, being content area experts was our thing. But now, in order for students to see that the investment in college is worth it, they don't need a content area expert. What they need is a content area expert who makes that content accessible and applicable in the real world. And how do we redefine what we do with students? Just a thought. But let me close by saying, thank you for participating today, and we hope you've learned something today, and that I think we are just beginning the conversations and collaborations regarding AI. We'd like to ask you to please take a moment to give us some feedback about today's sessions. We're dropping a link into the chat. And once you've opened that survey, it stays open even after the meeting closes, so you don't have to fill it out right now in these few seconds. And then lastly, remember that we will place this recording on our webpage, on our webinar webpage. We also have a pretty in-depth page on AI and ChatGPT with dozens of really excellent articles. And we're getting hits on that page from across the world, including Iceland and other places. So people are reading our stuff. We hope you will. Again, remember to check out the video, recommend the video to your colleagues who may be teaching today and didn't have an opportunity to come. All of our videos are also on our YouTube channel as well. And we'll drop the links for all of those for our webpage, our ChatGPT webpage, and so forth in the chat. Again, thank you for coming today, and I especially want to thank the panelists for their willingness to come and talk about something that is so new to all of us, and sharing their thoughts on it. And I look forward to continued conversations and opportunities to explore AI in higher education.